Right now, something strange is happening in the Amazon rainforest. Something that should feel like good news, but has scientists and an entire government bracing for catastrophe. The fires that scar the world's greatest forest every year have fallen to their quietest start in over a decade. The area burned so far this year is nearly 40% below the historic average. Deforestation has dropped to a 10-year low. By every visible measure, the Amazon is having its calmest year in memory. And yet, in the middle of this calm, Brazil has just hired the largest federal firefighting force in its history. More than 4,400 firefighters. A fire budget raised by 28% to nearly $200 million. Extra water-bombing planes. Extra helicopters. The director of Brazil's fire policy said it in one chilling sentence. We are prepared for the worst scenario. Why would a country prepare for the worst during the quiet? Because the people who study this forest can see what's forming 5,000 miles away in the warming waters of the Pacific Ocean. A climate monster with a name you already know, returning in what forecasters warn could be one of its strongest forms in over a century. The Amazon's fire season has only just begun. The peak is still ahead, September through January. And the last time this exact setup occurred, it produced the worst burning the Amazon has seen since records began. Stay with me until the end, because the story of what's coming for the world's largest rainforest is written in what happened just 2 years ago, and the calm you're seeing right now may be the deep breath before the fire. To understand why any of this matters, you first need to understand something most people get wrong. The Amazon is not supposed to burn. At all. This is not California, where fire is part of the forest's natural life cycle. The Amazon is one of the wettest places on Earth, a forest so vast and so humid that it manufactures its own weather. Its trees pull water from the soil and breathe it into the sky in astronomical quantities, forming what scientists call flying rivers. Airborne streams of moisture that carry more water than the Amazon River itself, delivering rainfall to farms and cities across South America. In its natural state, this forest is close to fireproof. A lightning strike fizzles in the wet understory, which means that when you see the Amazon burning, and in recent years the world has seen it burning on an apocalyptic scale, you are almost never looking at a natural disaster. You are looking at ignition by human hands, land being cleared for cattle and crops, fires set at the frontier of the forest, fires that, in a normal wet year, the living forest would contain and smother. The forest's humidity is its immune system, and that is exactly what drought destroys. Now let me show you what the worst case looks like, because we don't have to imagine it. It happened in 2024, and it is the reference point for everything scientists fear about the months ahead. In 2023, a powerful El Niño took hold of the Pacific. By 2024, its grip on South America had become a strangulation. The great rivers of the Amazon basin, highways of life for millions of people, fell to the lowest levels ever recorded. Entire communities that depend on river travel were stranded, cut off from food, fuel, and medicine. In the superheated, shrinking lakes, river dolphins, some of the rarest creatures on Earth, died in the warm shallows. The forest's immune system collapsed. The understory, that damp green layer between the canopy and the floor, dried into standing kindling. And then the fires came. The 2024 fire season became the worst the Amazon had seen in 20 years, and by burned area, the largest ever measured since satellite monitoring began in 1985. The fires grew into the second largest wildfire outbreak of the entire 21st century anywhere on Earth. Smoke plumes swallowed Brazilian cities thousands of kilometers away, turning afternoon skies orange, closing airports, sending children to hospitals. Fires escaped their intended clearings and did something profoundly alarming. They burned deep into standing primary rainforest, forests that had never burned in living memory, killing giant trees that had stood for centuries. That is what one strong El Niño did to a weakened Amazon. Hold that picture, because here is the forecast for the months ahead. In the Pacific right now, the machinery of El Niño is assembling again. Forecasters at NOAA put the odds of El Niño forming this summer at just over 60%. And critically, they warn there is roughly a 1 in 3 chance it reaches strong intensity during October to December. Some scientists and media have attached a heavier label to the possibility, a super El Niño, potentially among the strongest such events in more than a century. Nobody can promise that outcome. Forecast strength this far ahead is genuinely uncertain, and Disaster Watch will always tell you that plainly. But listen to who is taking it seriously. Carlos Nobre, the Brazilian climate scientist who first articulated the Amazon tipping point theory, arguably the single most respected voice on this forest's future, warns that if this El Niño builds as feared, its most intense effects on the Amazon will land between September and January. Suppressed rains, extended drought, a forest drying from the inside out, exactly as in 2023 and 2024, or worse. That is why Brazil is arming itself in the middle of a quiet year. The quiet is not the forecast. The quiet is the window. And the science that has emerged since the last drought makes the stakes clearer and darker than ever. Researchers analyzing the extreme droughts of 2023 and 2024 found that the Amazon's dry season, which historically lasted around 4 months, has stretched towards 6 months in heavily affected regions, with water deficits exceeding 150 millimeters. The forest is losing far more water than the sky returns. Those droughts drove a 9% increase in burned area and a 19% surge in forest degradation alerts, with impacts reaching over 4 million hectares. And the researchers documented a sinister shift. Fire is no longer just following deforestation. It is increasingly attacking standing forests, weakening them without felling them. Degraded forest is a wounded forest. Thinner canopy, drier interior, more flammable next year than it was last year. Fire begets dryness begets fire. And there's one more finding that reveals how humans are exploiting this weakness. In recent monitoring, more than half of newly detected deforestation occurred in areas that had recently burned. A record. Criminal land grabbers have learned that in a drying Amazon, fire itself is the cheapest chainsaw. Burn the forest, let it die, then claim the degraded land. The drier the forest becomes, the more attractive arson becomes. Climate and crime feeding each other. Which brings us to the phrase that hangs over everything. The reason the Amazon's fate is a global story and not a Brazilian one, the tipping point. The theory, developed by Nobre and colleagues, works like this. The Amazon waters itself. Those flying rivers exist because the forest is vast enough to recycle its own rainfall, each tree feeding the clouds that water the next. But deforestation and degradation are punching holes in that machine. Lose enough forest, and the recycling weakens. The dry season stretches. More forest dies without a single new fire being lit, and the system can begin to flip from rainforest toward a drier, savanna-like state, releasing its centuries of stored carbon instead of absorbing ours. Scientists warn that on current trajectories, more than half of the Amazon could be at risk of crossing critical thresholds by 2050. And a forest that flips from carbon sink to carbon source doesn't just doom its own wildlife. It accelerates warming for every human being on the planet, and it cuts the water supply to the South American agriculture that helps feed the world. Every severe El Niño drought is a shove toward that edge. The question scientists ask about the coming months is not just how much will burn, it's how much closer does this push the whole system. But here is the other half of this story, the half that headlines skip, and the reason the worst is not inevitable. Brazil is fighting back, and the numbers prove it's not just talk. Deforestation in the first half of this year fell 38% from last year, the lowest in a decade. Fires so far are 40% below the long-term average. Enforcement returned, political will returned, and the forest responded. Now the same government is spending like a country expecting war. The biggest fire budget on record, the most federal firefighters ever hired. Over 4,400 this season, the third consecutive year of escalation. More aircraft and pre-positioned crews at the highest risk frontiers, including a newly identified deforestation front in the south of Amazonas state. Scientists have paired the forecasts with early warning systems, mapping exactly where the drying understory makes fires most likely to escape. This is what it looks like when a nation reads the forecast and refuses to be surprised. In 2024, the Amazon was hit while weakened and underdefended. If the super El Niño comes, it will hit a forest that is, for the first time, expecting it. So let's be honest about where this leaves us, because that's what this channel is for. The Amazon is burning. It burns every year now, and the season is underway. Whether the worst is truly still ahead depends on a climate pattern that will reveal its full strength only over the coming weeks and months. If the Pacific delivers a strong or super El Niño, the window from September to January could bring drought on the scale of 2024 or beyond, falling on a forest that is drier, more degraded, and closer to its tipping point than at any moment in human history, defended by the largest firefighting mobilization Brazil has ever assembled. If the El Niño underdelivers, the Amazon may win a precious year of recovery. Either way, understand what you watched happen in this video. The world's greatest forest has become a place where the difference between a quiet year and the worst year ever recorded is decided by water temperatures in an ocean 5,000 miles away. That is how close to the edge the system now lives. Tonight, somewhere along the southern arc of the Amazon, the dry season is deepening. The understory is losing its moisture, day by day, exactly on schedule. In the Pacific, the warm water is gathering. And in bases across the Brazilian Amazon, more than 4,000 firefighters are checking their equipment and watching the same forecasts you now understand, waiting to find out whether the calm of this moment was a turning of the tide or simply the deep breath before the burn. The worst may still be ahead, but for the first time, so is the fight. If this video showed you what's really at stake in the months ahead, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because when the Amazon's fire season peaks and the El Niño shows its true strength, we'll break down exactly what's happening, week by week, with the real numbers. And tell me in the comments, do you think Brazil's record preparation can hold the line against a super El Niño? Or is the tipping point closer than anyone admits? I read every comment. Stay alert, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.